Have you ever just stopped and wondered if what you see, what you feel, your everyday experience, is it actually real? Or maybe just like a very convincing illusion your mind's creating?
It's a huge question, right? Really gets you thinking.
Definitely. So today, on the deep dive, we're tackling exactly that. We're asking, is the world we perceive actually the real world?
Yeah, and our goal here is to try and decode that matrix of our own minds, essentially. We want to explore how our perception isn't just a passive receiver, but it actively shapes what we take to be real.
It's about looking under the hood of our own experience.
Exactly, getting past the surface level.
We've got three really powerful sources to help us navigate this. We'll start way back with Plato's Allegory of the Cave from the Republic.
Yeah, classic for a reason.
Then we jump forward to the 20th century, Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception.
His experiences there were quite something.
And finally, we bring it right up to date with neuroscientist Anil Seth and his book, Being You, A New Science of Consciousness.
Really cutting edge stuff on how the brain works.
And look, this isn't just going to be abstract theory. We really want to connect this back to you, the listener. How can these ideas actually change how you see things day to day?
Yeah, finding the practical side is key.
Okay, so let's dive in with Plato, his Allegory of the Cave. It's such a famous image. Can you set the scene for us?
Right. So Plato asks us to picture these people chained up inside a dark cave since birth. They're facing a wall, can't turn around.
Okay.
Behind them, there's a fire. And between the fire and the prisoners, people are carrying objects, kind of like puppets.
Yeah.
These objects cast shadows on the wall the prisoners are facing.
And that's all they see, just the shadows.
That's it. Their entire reality from day one is just flickering shadows. That is the world, as far as they know.
Wow. So what was Plato getting at with this? Why this whole setup?
Well, his main point really was that most of us live in a kind of ignorance. We mistake what we perceive through our limited senses, those shadows, for the actual truth, for reality itself.
So we're kind of like the prisoners without even realizing it.
In a way, yes. Plato believed that true reality, the real essence of things, lies outside this sensory world, outside our sort of social conditioning. It's beyond the cave.
And then, the famous part, one prisoner gets out. What happens then?
Right. One escapes. And imagine going from a dark cave into bright sunlight. It's blinding, overwhelming at first. But eventually they see the real world trees, the sun, actual objects, not just shadows.
A completely different reality.
Totally. And this person, now understanding things differently, feels compelled to go back. They want to free the others.
How does that go down?
Not well, unfortunately. The prisoner's still chained up. They think he's crazy. They mock him. The shadows are familiar, comfortable even. This talk of a real world outside sounds absurd, even threatening. They actually prefer the illusion they know.
That's quite a statement about human nature, isn't it? Sticking to what's familiar, even if it's limiting.
It really is. It highlights our resistance to challenging core beliefs, especially when those beliefs define our whole world.
So, if we bring this forward, what are our caves today? What kind of shadows are we maybe mistaking for reality?
That's the critical question Plato forces us to ask. Our caves could be, unexamined assumptions, cultural biases, maybe even the filter bubbles created by social media algorithms. Anything that limits our perspective without us realizing it.
So the core insight from Plato is, you're probably in some kind of cave. And the challenge is to recognize it and try to get out.
Exactly. You're living in a cave of illusions, break free. That's the essence.
Okay, so how do we actually do that, practically speaking?
Well, one big step is questioning your beliefs. Seriously ask, where did this idea come from? Is it mine, or did I just absorb it?
Like investigating the source code of your own thoughts.
Kind of, yeah. And another thing is deliberately seeking out different perspectives. Read things you disagree with. Travel, if you can, to places totally unlike home. Talk to people with different life experiences.
Step outside the echo chamber.
Precisely. And embrace discomfort. Plato's escaped prisoner was initially blinded by the sun, that discomfort. It often means you're actually learning something new, pushing past old limits. It's a sign of growth.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's shift gears now. Fast forward quite a bit to the 20th century and Aldous Huxley. After his experiences, particularly with mescaline, he wrote The Doors of Perception. How did he see this filtering of reality?
Huxley had this really powerful idea. He argued that our brain isn't designed to let all of reality in. Instead, it acts more like a reducing valve.
A reducing valve, meaning?
Meaning reality in its raw, unfiltered state is just too much. It's an overwhelming flood of information, sensations, possibilities. So the brain filters it way down.
Okay.
It lets through only a tiny trickle, basically what's necessary for our day-to-day survival and functioning within our specific cultural context. The rest, it's blocked out.
So according to Huxley, what we experience isn't the whole picture at all.
Not even close. It's a highly edited, very limited version. Our perception is shaped by biology, yes, but also heavily by language, by culture, by our immediate needs. We're only getting a sliver.
That really changes how you think about just looking around the room.
Absolutely. The key lesson from Huxley is, what you perceive isn't all there is. Your mind is fundamentally a filter, an editor, not just a camera.
So if our brains are naturally reducing reality, how can we become more aware of this filtering process? Or maybe even, like, open the valve a tiny bit wider sometimes?
That's the million-dollar question Huxley explored. One practical way is mindfulness meditation.
How does that help?
Mindfulness trains you to pay attention to your direct experience without immediately layering on judgments or labels. You start to notice the difference between raw sensation and the stories your mind tells about that sensation. You see the filter in action.
You catch the brain doing its editing job.
Exactly. Another avenue Huxley touched on is exploring altered states of awareness. Now, that doesn't have to mean psychedelics. Things like focused breath work, maybe sensory deprivation tanks, even deep immersion in nature, or long periods of silence can temporarily shift that reducing valve.
They change the input, or how the brain processes it.
Right. They can quiet the usual chatter and filtering, allowing different aspects of reality or just different ways of perceiving to emerge.
Interesting. And you also mentioned simplicity.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, but in our hyper-stimulated world, sometimes consciously reducing external inputless noise, less media, less constant distraction, can actually expand perception.
Oh, so?
By giving the brain less to filter out, you might become more sensitive to what's actually there, the subtleties you usually miss in the everyday rush. It's about creating space.
Okay, that's a fascinating take from Huxley. Now let's bring this right up to the present day with neuroscientist Anil Seth and his work in Being You. How does modern neuroscience look at this?
Seth takes these ideas into the realm of brain science, and his concept is pretty mind-blowing. He argues that perception is essentially a controlled hallucination.
Whoa, hallucination. That sounds unreal.
Well, he means controlled. It's not random chaos. His point is that we don't just passively receive information from our senses, like light hitting our eyes. Instead, our brain is constantly predicting what's out there.
Predicting how?
Based on all its past experiences, its internal models of the world, it makes a continuous best guess about the causes of the sensory signals it's receiving. What we experience as reality is that best guess.
So it's less about seeing what's there and more about the brain constructing what it expects to be there.
In large part, yes. It's an active construction process, heavily influenced by expectation and prior belief. It's not just bottom-up data processing. It's top-down prediction meeting bottom-up signals.
That explains why two people can see the same event and have totally different takeaways.
Precisely. Their brains are running slightly different predictive models based on their unique histories and expectations. They're generating slightly different controlled hallucinations of that same external event.
So the big lesson from Seth is, reality isn't just something we passively observe, it's something we actively generate.
Yes. Reality is co-created by your brain's predictions, expectations, and beliefs. We're constantly hallucinating our world into existence, but usually those hallucinations match up well enough with the world to be useful for survival. They're controlled.
Okay, if our experience is a controlled hallucination, how do we work with that? Can we influence our own hallucinations, so to speak?
That's the empowering part. First step is simply becoming aware of your brain's predictive nature. Start noticing your own assumptions, your snap judgments. How are they shaping what you perceive before you even fully process something?
Catching the prediction in action.
Exactly. Second, cultivate cognitive flexibility. Can you deliberately try to interpret a situation differently? Can you genuinely entertain alternative explanations, even if your brain's first best guess feels really strong?
Like consciously overriding the default prediction.
Kind of, yeah, or at least questioning it. And finally, challenge your automatic reactions. When you feel a strong emotion or perceive something intensely, take a beat. Ask, Is this the absolute reality, or is this my brain's interpretation, colored by my past, my mood, my expectations right now?
That pause seems crucial, just creating that tiny space between stimulus and response.
It is. It allows you to shift from being unconsciously run by your predictions to consciously engaging with them.
Wow. Okay, so we've journeyed from Plato's cave through Huxley's doors of perception to Seth's controlled hallucinations. Let's try to synthesize this. What's the connecting thread here?
It's really striking, isn't it? Across thousands of years, different methods, you see this convergence. Plato tells us we're trapped by illusions unless we question them.
Right, break free from the cave.
Huxley shows us our biology itself filters reality, urging us to widen that narrow lens.
Open the doors of perception.
And Seth reveals our brains actively construct our perceived world based on predictions, inviting us to become conscious of this construction process.
Become aware of the hallucination.
The common theme is that our experience of the world is profoundly shaped by internal factors, whether ignorance, biological filters, or predictive processing. Reality isn't just out there, it's significantly in here.
So, for everyone listening, what are some concrete steps, like a checklist, to start working with these ideas?
Okay, maybe 4 key things. 1, journal about your core assumptions. What do you take for granted as real or true? Why? Get curious about the foundations of your worldview.
Good one. What else?
2, try daily meditation, even just 5 or 10 minutes. The goal isn't necessarily bliss, but to practice noticing the stream of thoughts, feelings, and sensations without automatically identifying with them. See the difference between awareness and the content of awareness.
Right.
3, actively seek out conversations with people who see the world very differently. Listen to understand, not to win. This directly challenges your brain's predictive models and fosters that cognitive flexibility we talked about.
Get comfortable with different perspectives.
Exactly. And 4, keep learning. Read more philosophy, neuroscience, psychology. Keep expanding your understanding of how minds and reality might interact. Build a bigger mental map.
These aren't just intellectual exercises, are they?
Not at all. They're practices that empower you. By understanding how your reality is constructed, you gain more influence over the quality of that reality. You become a more conscious creator of your own experience.
That's a really powerful takeaway. So the final thought here is, reality might not be what it seems at first glance, but just knowing that, being aware of the potential illusion, that awareness itself is the start of something important.
It's the first step towards a different kind of freedom, yeah. A freedom within your own mind, understanding how you participate in creating your world.
So, maybe the challenge for all of us is, next time you open your eyes, next time you make a judgment or feel a certain way about something, is pause and ask, am I seeing the world as it is, or am I seeing the world as I am?
A question worth asking again and again.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mind's matrix. Lots to think about there.